Okay, so we talked ourselves through a little bit about the computer. We talked ourselves through making a set of folders to organize your project before you even get started in Adobe Premiere. So now we're going to go through some of the basics for editing in Adobe Premiere. So the first thing we have to do is we have to know where to find the software. You can go to inside the hard drive here, and you can go to Applications folder and scrub through and find Adobe Premiere 2019 or whatever year it is at that time you're watching this, and you can double click that and it will open the software. But the easiest way to do it is to just hover your mouse down here at the bottom. This area right here is called the dock. This is a group of programs that we have attached to the dock so to find them easy. So Adobe Premiere 2019 is right there, and it very often will be open when you sit down at the computer because somebody was using it last. But for this purpose, I wanted to show you how to open it. So you're going to hover, and you're going to click, and it's going to start bouncing. And once it starts bouncing, that means the software is opening. And you wait for that to open. And when it does, you're going to see this screen here that goes through the loading screen. And so when you're working in Premiere every day, like we are, it's going to open up. The first thing you're going to see when it opens up is a start screen, and that start screen will have the last 10 projects that were used on this computer. So if you worked in here yesterday and you're sitting back down at your computer, more than likely your project is going to be right here. These are the last 10 things that were worked on this computer. So HNN show gets worked on every day on this, every school day on this computer, and it's right here on the top because it was the last thing that was opened. So if you sit down and you were the last person to use that computer, your project is going to be right here in this start screen. But in this case, we are starting a new project. So that's what you do. You click New. Now, and it opens up this new project thing. This is where you name your project, tell it where you want it to save. You give it any parameters for how you wanted to set up this project to default to. So the most important two things to remember are naming it. This is Premiere Pro Practice. Okay, you name it. And if I just hit OK right there, it's going to save it. But it's going to save my project that I just made in a folder called Documents Scratch HNN. And you do not want your Premiere Pro Practice project to go into the Scratch folder for HNN, because if you don't notice that that's where it went, you won't know where to find it when you want to go find your project again. So you then, to avoid that, you click Browse, and this is where you navigate to the folder that you've already made for yourself, which was in Beckemeyer, Premiere Pro Practice, right? And inside this project folder, you want to save your Adobe Premiere projects. So you hit Choose, and then it says, so now you've named it, you've told it where you want it to go, to the Premiere Pro Practice folder, and then you hit OK to create the project. And once you create the project, Adobe Premiere is going to open with a blank screen. It's going to be an empty project. You haven't done anything to this project yet, so it's going to open up, and let me fix my workspace here. Save layout. Okay. I just want some of these things to go away. Hold on a second. Let's just simplify some stuff. Okay. So when you open up Premiere, most likely some version of what you're looking at here is going to open up. You have 4 panels. Before we go into this, I want to show you something. Come back over here to your Documents folder. Documents, Scratch, Beckemeyer, Premiere Pro Practice. And now you can see the little purple Premiere Pro Practice project file that you made. That means this project is going to hold everything you do for this particular project. So this purple file right here is this blank screen you're looking at. So you have all kinds of possibilities you can do here. Okay, so when you first look at Premiere Pro, the first thing you see is a blank screen. This blank screen is broken into 4 main panels. And when you can select any of the panels by clicking inside of it, and you see the little blue outline that goes around the panel itself. So right now we want to start a new project. So we're going to click on the project panel. This panel right here will hold everything you need for your project. So it's going to hold all of your video, all of your audio, all of your B-roll, sound, music, any of that stuff is going to come into here, and you import it into your project. Importing is bringing in all of that stuff, the assets that we talked about, audio, video, music. You import them, as in bring it into this project, into this panel right here, the project panel. Now, when you start a brand new project, or if your project panel is empty, this little thing that says import media to start pops up, and you can just very simply, very quickly double click that, and it will take you to the window where you can import stuff. So Beckemeyer project, Premiere Pro Practice, and then you have all that stuff right there. Now, but there are 3 other ways you can import video or import your assets into the project, and I want to show you those first before we get started. Sorry. So the first way, anytime you ever doing anything in Premiere ever, if you get stumped and you can't find something, if you're taking the Adobe Premiere certification exam and you're like, how do I do that? They're asking you to do something you don't remember. You can find that in these little drop-down menus up at the top. So anything you have to do with Premiere, like 99.9% of the things you ever have to do with Premiere, there are keyboard shortcuts for. You can click and drag, but if none of that stuff, like if you just can't remember how to do something, you just look for it in these drop-down menus. You see little things that are grayed out right now because we can't, there's no shots loaded, so you can't do a mark in or a mark out. But everything Premiere refers to or needs is right here in these drop-down menus. So remember that if you ever get stumped and can't find something, maybe you can probably find it in one of these little drop-downs. So to import media, you go File, Import, and you click that button, and it pulls up the same screen that we were just in a few seconds ago, right? So I'm going to cancel that because there's another way to show you. The next way is if you're in your project panel here like this, you can right-click on the mouse, and that brings up the import screen. So again, the same screen that we looked at before. Or you can use a keyboard shortcut, and the keyboard shortcut for importing is Command-I. If you hold down Command and click I, it will open up that same screen. If you're ever wondering what the keyboard shortcut for a particular function is or a command is, you want to come to it here in the drop-down. We're going to do File, Import, and you can see this little Command-I notification, this little thing on the right-hand side there. It's telling you what the keyboard shortcut for this particular function is. You can see some things have keyboard shortcuts and other things don't, but they're always going to be right here. So you can see these match frame is F. You have a bunch of different things. Anyway, so for the one we're talking about now, it's import media is Command-I. But since it's a brand new project and it's easy and simple, we're just going to double click import media to start. And it's going to open up our window. And we're going to go to Beckemeyer, Scratch, Beckemeyer, Premiere Pro Practice. And we're going to pull in the handful of shots that we pulled in, that we dropped in our folder when we were when we're preparing this project. Now, you can bring in this shot all by itself or these two shots all by themselves, but chances are you're going to want to bring in all the video you've put in your folder, which means you can just click on this video folder here without double clicking on it. You can click on this and hit import, and it will bring in this B-roll folder. It'll bring in this interviews folder, and it'll bring in everything in this folder. So we could go through here and import all the folders linked. You can't import a project into itself. That's like Adobe Premiere Inception. You don't want to do that. It won't let you do that. But you can bring in all these folders even though the folders are empty, because maybe you've gone through and created these folders and you know you're going to put stuff in there eventually and you want to stay organized from the start, and you can just import all of those things into Premiere even if they're empty. So actually, I stand corrected. It won't let you import an empty folder. That's right. They changed that a while back. They don't let you bring in an empty folder, I guess, because it's a waste of clicks. But anyway, you can then come in here and new bin, make yourself a new folder called graphics, and there you are, just like that. And then once you are in here like this with your folders, you can now also import more things into there if you wanted to. So Command I, come here to this B-roll, select here, bring that in, and you can now add that shot to your folder, and it's there. So you can add in video, you can add new folders. If you find out that if you've got like 20 shots and you're like, you see the names IMG 6825, blah, 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 all that stuff, you can rename these. So we're going to call this Aiden Pick. Okay, so now we can just go to it. Where's that picture of Aiden? Oh, it's right there. Aiden Pick. Okay, so we're going to close this. I realized that all those things I brought in were still photos, so I'm going to try to find some video here. Video, import, documents, Scratch, Beckemeyer. I'm just going to find some folder, some pictures, some video from another folder. August, September, raw videos. Okay, so here's some video from one of our shows. Bring this in here. Okay, so now we're done. We're done, with our basic setup of the project. We've learned how to make some bins. We've imported stuff into the bins, and now we want to start editing video footage. So we double click our we double click our video, and it opens up in what's called the source panel. The source panel means this is my original source, and it's showing it to you in this panel called the source panel. So in here you can play, you can stop, you can advance forward one frame at a time. In video, there are different frame rates in video. Some are 30 frames a second, some are 24 frames a second. But either way, 24 frames or 30 frames a second means there are 30 frames in this 1 second. So if I use this little step forward by 1 frame button and watch the time code number, which is hours, minutes, seconds, and frames, there are 30 frames inside 1 second. So we will click this 30 times. Before it gets to 1 second. So we just advanced forward 1 click at a time for 30 times for 1 second. Now, since that's obnoxious and you don't want to do that all the time, sometimes you need to move forward 1 or 2 or 3 frames to make an adjustment to your in point or your out point. That's fine. That's what that button is for. You can also use the cursor keys on the the keyboard. Left cursor will take it back one frame at a time. Right cursor will, arrow keys, we're talking about the arrow keys in the bottom of the keyboard. Press the right one, will take it forward one frame at a time. But let's say we want to, right here, we've got the video fades in, and we want to select right before the fade in starts to pick that part of the video. Now, this little blue thing right here on the screen is called the playhead. The playhead is the representation of where, it's like the cursor. It's where your video is in place, okay? So we're gonna drag our playhead right to right there, right before it fades out. Right before it fades in. And we're saying, we wanna tell the computer, we wanna tell Premiere that we want our video, when we drop it into the timeline, this is the part of the video that we want. That's where we want it to start. So to do that though, because we've got 33 seconds over here to the left, that if we were to just drag this clip down here into our timeline panel, it's going to drag the whole video down there. So what you want to do is make a selection. So you want to mark an in point, as in we want to start the video here. In this place, we want to start the video here. So we're going to come here to these mark in, right here in the source panel, mark in and mark out. So the mark in is the button we click to start the video there. And so watch what happens when I click here. When I click there, it puts a little hash mark right there and saying, okay, so Beckemeyer is saying when he drags this video down into the timeline, he wants from here forward, he doesn't want any of this 30 seconds of raw footage here over here. So we're going to start it right there. And then we're going to say, let's say we only want 2 minutes of this for whatever purpose. I'm going to come to the 2 second mark. Okay. And we're going to set our out point. So watch what happens when I click here. I'm going to click out. And now we've told the program, we've told Premiere that between this little blue hash mark here and this little hash mark here, that's the portion of video that we want. It does not delete all this extra stuff over here to the right of the out point or to the left of the in point. It doesn't delete it. It just doesn't select it to drag it down into the timeline. So, in theory, you could drop this down into your timeline and then come back to this same shot later and make a whole other selection. Okay, and then drag that down to the timeline too. So you've used, like if it's an interview and somebody talks for 5 minutes, but you only want to use 30 seconds at a time, you would select your 30 seconds. You would select your soundbite from the first question, drag it down to the timeline, and then come back, select another soundbite and drag it down into the timeline. So you can use the same video multiple times. That's the beauty of nonlinear editing. So let's come back to our initial selection, and so now what we're gonna do is, there's a couple of different ways to get this into the timeline. The easiest way and the most common way, I would say, is to click the video and drag it down here into the timeline. But you can also use what's called an insert button or an overwrite button, and I'll talk to you a little bit about those in a few minutes. But the quickest way, especially for the first shot, you're just going to click it and drag it down into the timeline. And what happens when I did that is it created a little file over here called the sequence file. The sequence file is what you think of when you're saying the sequence of events. So first shot, second shot, some audio, some music fades in. That sequence is everything, is your edit. It is basically your edit. And it defaults to naming the sequence whatever the file was called. So if our original file, this is an original recording from our H&N show, which we dated 9/22 of 21, take 2. So that it did that. Now, if you look up here in the top left of the sequence panel, we have a little blue box around our sequence. You can see this little thing. This is 9/22-21-2. That is our sequence. So if we X'd out of this, the panel would go blank again, but our sequence, if you look over here in your bin, in your project panel, is still here, and all you have to do to reopen it is to double click it and it opens back up. Now, we want to rename this. Let's just name this Premiere Practice. I still can't type. Practice sequence. Okay. So if you're working on a longer thing, like you maybe a short film with 10 scenes in it, you might have a sequence for scene 1, a sequence for scene 2, scene 3, scene 4, all the way down. So you can have as many sequences as you need. And you can start new sequences manually by coming up here, again, to the drop-down menu, File, New, Sequence. You can do that. And it's there. You can rename it. Take 2. Okay. Or you can click this little button right here that says New Item. And New Items, you have a bunch of things you can do as a new item, and Sequence is one of them. So you could click that too, again. And then you rename it by clicking on the text. Take 3. Okay. So you have all those. We don't need those, so I'm going to go ahead and delete them. All right. So, but what we've done now is we've made our first edit. We've gotten the first, what was that? 2 minutes or whatever, a minute and a half. We got our video dropped down into the timeline. Now let's say we want to edit the next part. Come up here to this, double click the shot again, and you see this shot has the same in points and out points marked because that was the last thing we did to this clip before we dropped it onto the timeline. So we can now change that and make another in point, make another out point, and it sets a completely new thing. You'll notice that it did not change what was down here in the timeline already. It didn't change that. That's been not set in stone, but that's been set, okay? Now, we can now click and drag that down here like that. Now we have 2 things in the timeline. So, but I want to show you something else. So, let's say that you want to do this, but if you've noticed that having to drag the mouse to click the in point, drag that, click the out point, it's a little clunky and slow. So there are these things that I was mentioning called keyboard shortcuts. And the thing, just get used to doing this at all times. You're going to have 3 buttons on the keyboard that will help you play, stop, and rewind. Okay, and those buttons are J, K, and L. J will rewind the video for you, and if you hit J a couple of times, it'll scrub through really quick. Or if you hit it just once, like this, it will play at normal speed, but just backwards. Okay, you can hit K to stop, and L then will play. And if you hit L multiple times, it will scrub through the video really quickly there too. So now we can now say to ourselves, I got to get to the part where we fade in, so I can scrub through to that real quick by pressing L a couple of times. Back up, stop it, and now instead of clicking the mouse and dragging to the in and out point, we can just hit I to set an in point. I, the letter I, which is right above the J, K, and L keys. So you can basically make these edits now without moving your hand almost at all. Your fingers have to move up and down, but you can do that quickly. Now we're going to scrub through to here, and now we're going to set our out point by pressing O. I and O, in, out, okay? J, K, L, I, and O. Those 5 buttons are going to make the editing process so much quicker for you because you can just sit here and watch the screen and scrub through by tapping L a few times, then resetting your in point, come here to the end. So let's just say we're going to do the end of the show. So at the end of the show, we normally do a fade out. Hopefully we did this day. Okay, so we did. So now what we want is we're going to let it play till right after the fade out, right there. We're going to set our out point. Okay. In point right there. And now all we have to do is to click the video and drag it down into the timeline. now we have 2 shots down in the timeline. And we're well on our way to editing. There's a couple more things I want to show you. Now that we're down here in the sequence, in the timeline panel, working in our sequence, let's say that, we've dropped down too much of this video right here. There's too much of Adriana for this, and we only want to, maybe we just want to, by the way, I think I forgot to mention, you can also press the space bar to start and stop. That's a fairly common use of the space bar in other players like QuickTime or YouTube. So let's say we just wanted to stop there. So let's say we've decided that we need to cut this shot, not let it run out all this minute and a half. But we want to cut it right here. There's a quick way to do that once it's in the timeline. If you see, you hover over the edit point between these 2 shots right here, you can see where the first clip syncs up against the second clip. If we press play here and there's nothing there, it goes to black. And then when this clip comes back up in the timeline, you see a picture again, but normally we're going to have them right next to each other like that. This little line right here is called the edit point. So if we want to make this shot shorter, so what we would do is we'd hover over the edit point with our mouse, and you get this little red arrow, bracketed red arrow. And if you click on that, it's telling you that if you drag it to the left, it will edit your clip for you. So now we've done that, and we have this space, which we can then just delete, and we've adjusted our shot. Same thing goes for the other way. So if we want to adjust this clip over here to the right, we want to change the end point of this clip, we can click it and drag it. Whichever direction the arrow is pointing is the way you'll be able to make that edit. And you can just hover over this side, it'll go to the right, or hover over this side, and it'll go to the left. It sort of intuits for you. Now, so we've done that. What we can also do, instead of clicking and dragging it like I just showed you, we can come over here and use the toolbar. The toolbar has a bunch of helpful tools that we'll get into more later, but a common one here is the razor tool. So you could click that, and then you would click where you want the clip to cut. You click it, and you move your playhead here. Now you see that we added an edit point there. So this didn't delete the clip, but it did make a third clip in the middle of these 2 original clips. So we can now delete it like we did before, or we can now grab it and manipulate it as a third clip in the timeline. Most of the time when you're doing what I was just describing to you, you'd just delete it and go, which is why just clicking it and dragging it might be better for what you're trying to do here. Okay, so that's that. Another thing here, you've got a couple of items in the timeline in the sequence that I need to kind of explain to you. So when you drag this clip down to the timeline, you see 2 things here. The top one is video, and the bottom one is your audio. And you can see the little waveforms there, and you can see your video. Sometimes you see your video thumbnail. Anyway, so that's the clip there. So you have video up here on top and audio down here on the bottom. Now, if you look what happens when I click on the thing, it selects the audio and the video. So when I move it, it's going to grab both audio and video and move them in sync with each other. But every now and then, well, not even every now and then, fairly common, you want to maybe move the audio or the video out of alignment with with itself. But you can't do that while they are linked like that, because if I just drag here, it adjusts both of them. Okay, but that's why you come over here to this linked selection button. Okay, and if you click that and turn it off, I normally leave this on all the time unless I need to turn it off for something. Because now that it's off, when I click here, it's a bell ringing, blah, 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 the bell ring. When I click that, you can see that I've adjusted the video, okay? Now I can move the video and the audio stays right where it is. But the audio and the video are now out of sync. The audio and video are now out of sync, which sometimes you do want. Sometimes you want, hey, I like what she's saying here, but I want it underneath another clip, okay? This is how you would start to cut your maybe voiceover or an interview where somebody's talking. You want to drop a bunch of different clips of video on top of what that person's saying so you can hear them, but you see something different the whole time, okay? And then you say, oh, never mind, I don't want to do all that. You want to do something called an undo, edit, undo. So see if in the drop down you have edit, undo, but you can also see that the keyboard shortcut for that command is Command Z. And you can undo all the way back. Okay? It'll undo, I think, 99 levels back, 99 moves back. So, one more thing, then we'll talk about saving the project, and then we'll be done with this section. So, one more thing right here. You see this little thing called the little blue magnet? It's called snapping in the timeline. It's called snapping. And if you look right here, you can see how when I drag this close to something, it just grabs it and sticks to it. It snaps to it, okay? Now, 99% of the time, you're going to leave that on. But if you are, because I'll show you, I'll turn it off, and you're got your clip over here and you want to drag over here and you want to attach it right here to the edge of this, you can very easily, it's hard to aim perfectly and get it right there on sync, because I could either not get it far enough and you see a little black flicker there, or you could accidentally cover up something that you need in your other clip. Just, it doesn't do you any favors. So same thing goes for here when you're trying to attach to the playhead. It doesn't really get to it. So most of the time that's helpful. Sometimes it's not and you want to get it out of your way, so just turn it off. Keyboard shortcut to turn snapping on and off is S. S will turn it on and off. I normally leave it on unless I don't need it for something. Then when you're done working on your project, you want to do File, save your project, and it automatically saves into the folder where you saved it to before. But my advice is to constantly be saving. So if you're doing a big long 30-second or 1 minute or 2 minute story and you want to save your project frequently, because anytime if computer gets turned off or the software crashes, you don't have your work saved and you have to start all over. So the keyboard shortcut for saving, File, Save, you can see the keyboard shortcut for saving is Command S. So all you have to do is hit Command S. And I keep my hand sort of near the Command S, and I'm constantly Command S or Command Z for undoing. I think I told you about Command Z for undoing. So Command Z will undo your edits, Command S will save, and they're right there by your fingers. So the last thing you want to do when you're done is save your project one last time, and then close the Premiere project down, because you don't want somebody else to sit at your project and start clicking around or accidentally messing it up or anything like that. So you close down the Premiere Pro project and it goes into your folder and you're all done for the day, and that's it. Okay, everybody, that's it for this time. I will be back with more Premiere practice stuff at another time. Okay, see ya.